Like I'm asking why questions there a lot. Why are we doing it this way? Why would we do this? So strategy, if you like. Then there's the sort of peer relationship. So I use it a lot for brainstorming when I'm out walking. Help me work through these ideas, or I've got some random ideas, just chuck them all out, and now please organize that and structure that. And it's all done through the app, all through voice. And by the time I get back to my desk, there it all is in text that I can then go use. Because most of our lives we're dealing with keyboards and text, and so that's why this is so useful. But the 80% of time is I liken it more to like a VA. I mean, organize a lot questions there a lot. Why are we doing it this way? Why would we do this? So strategy, if you like. Then there's the sort of peer relationship. So I use it a lot for brainstorming when I'm out walking. Help me work through these ideas, or I've got some random ideas, just chuck them all out, and now please organize that and structure that. And it's all done through the app, all through voice. And by the time I get back to my desk, there it all is in text that I can then go use. Because most of our lives we're dealing with keyboards and text, and so that's why this is so useful. But the 80% of time is I liken it more to like a VA. I mean, let's face it, we're all sitting at machines. Most of the work that we do now that we're all remote is through a computer, and AI is showing remarkable abilities to do an awful lot of that work. So sort of thinking it as I do a lot of coding these days because I find it really fun. And it's almost like I've got this junior dev sitting next to me that can write the code. I have to come up with the ideas and the strategy and the creativity at this point, but then it will go brrr. I mean, just this morning, I wrote 200 lines of code, took a couple of minutes, and it worked first time. It's mind-blowing how good it's gotten in the last year and a half. So you've got this sort of teacher mentor, brainstorming peer, and then like doer, the VA approach. But the other really, really critical thing, like Apple told us the other day that we shouldn't call it artificial intelligence, we should call it Apple intelligence. I've been using for 7 years this phrase alien intelligence. I think that's a sort of better way to get your head around it because it helps with the expectation setting. A lot of people, because it's software, because we go to a computer and use it, the expectation is more like a piece of software. So whether you use, I don't know, Asana or Xero or Salesforce, when you use it, software does the same thing every time. Geeks would call it deterministic. It's following a bunch of rules. And so you get used to it doing the same thing every time. AI ain't like that. The biggest negative that a lot of people will say is, oh, but it hallucinates. It makes mistakes. Well, if you can flip that to thinking of that as a feature, not a bug, of course it makes mistakes. It's making stuff up. That's the generative in generative AI. It is creating this stuff. That's what makes it so mind-blowingly useful. And that's obviously these days, images, music, video, which I know very little about. That's not my sort of area. But even just text, even just words, it is making stuff up. We can get into a whole discussion if you want about like, is it creative? Can it really truly be creative? I don't know. I disagree with a lot of people on that. I think it can be pretty amazingly creative, at least as much as an average human. It's not expert level yet. It's not as good as an expert in their domain in a lot of areas. Some areas it is, but it's the breadth, it's the ability for it to have basically read every book on the planet and be able to remember and recall that. If we had somebody in our businesses like that, that could be incredibly useful. Like, now I need you to do this and be a persuasive copywriter. Now I need you to go over here and do this. Now I need you to go write some Google Sheets formulas. Now I need you to, and it can do all of those things given enough, context and input. So that's that. So last little bit, and then we can get into stuff. But so if you're going to use it, therefore, it's like onboarding a new staff member. We have to be careful not to keep comparing it to people. That's why I use alien. It's kind of a bit like a human and a person, but it can do some crazy stuff, and it can do stuff that we don't even keep comparing it to bit, and then we can get into stuff. But and it can do all of those things given enough, context and input. So that's that. So last little bit, and then we can get into stuff. But so if you're going to use it, therefore, it's like onboarding a new staff member. We have to be careful not to keep comparing it to people. That's why I use alien. It's kind of a bit like a human and a person, but it can do some crazy stuff, and it can do stuff that we don't even know yet. Like we're still figuring out what this latest level of model can do, these emergent properties. And that's why the big companies are sort of trying to slow down the release of this stuff. Obviously, they test it a lot internally, but you can have 1,000 people red teaming it. You're still not going to come up with all the crazy ways that weird humans are going to use this. And so that's why they want to sort of get it out into the world so that they can see the real use cases of this stuff. But if you think about onboarding an employee, like I would imagine most of your audience has hired a VA.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you first do that, you're like, oh shit, now I've got all this extra work I need to do. I've got to think of what I'm going to delegate to them. I've got to come up with stuff. I've got to train them. I've got to write SOPs so that they can follow the SOPs, which of course your guys are fantastic at helping businesses like my old business create. You come and sit next to us and say, what are you doing now? What are you doing now? What are you doing now? And documenting all of that. Huge shout out to Systemology for that. That same level of process is so useful for onboarding this weird new alien into your business. Because you get a new intern start, a new junior person come into your business, and you go, oh yeah, write 3 emails to those 3 customers. Bash, bash, bash. And then you look at them, what's that? Like, what are you doing? That's rubbish. Yeah, well, you didn't tell me anything about the customers. You didn't even tell me their names. You didn't tell me the history of how you've been working with them or what to write an email about. The more context you give this weird alien, the better job it's going to be able to do of then writing those emails. Oh, you wanted them in your voice. Oh, okay. Well, give me some examples then of your voice. Teach me what your voice sounds like. Oh, you wanted me to reference the meeting last week. You didn't say that. Give me the meeting notes from last week. And now I can write a better email. So
Yeah.
onboarding this alien takes time. And a lot of us, when we hired our first VA, we got the stuff back and we went, bloody hell, it would have been faster to do this myself. Get the big red pen out. This is rubbish. But if you take the time to mentor, to coach that person, to train them, this is where we talked a lot about this back in the days when we shared the office, but my 10-80-10 framework,
Yeah.
it's remarkable how much that overlays over this new AI. So for those that have never heard of that, and why would you? Because why would you have heard of my framework? But 10-80-10, the first 10 is basically setting up the thing to do. You can think of this as a project, but it's probably easier to bring it down to the level of a task. So the first 10% is the what are we going to do? What's the strategy? Why are we doing this thing? The middle 80% is doing the work. And it might start off with you doing 40%, somebody doing 20%, and you doing the last 40%. But the goal is 10-80-10. You doing 10%, someone else doing 80. And then the last 10%, which is the bit that no one ever talks about with the 80-20 rule, is the coaching and the mentoring and the training of how do you get this person doing the work to be better and better and better so that they can do more and more of the work. And ultimately, you're not doing as much of that. Maybe they don't do it as brilliantly as you in all your snowflake glory could possibly do it, but it's leverage, right? Someone else is spending the time to do that. And the more you coach them, the better they get. I was listening to a podcast the other day. Sorry, I'm talking way too much here.
No, this is fantastic.
God, how many Red Bulls did I have this morning? None. Listening to this wonderful podcast, which I've recommended to heaps of people, with Sam Korkos, I believe his name is. He's the CEO of a company called Levels on the Tim Ferriss podcast. It's about 3 hours long, and it's just a gold mine of practical tips and tricks. And what he suggested there is just record everything. I'm sure like systemologists would sort of do a lot of similar things, right? But just record everything on Loom. You don't have to use it. You don't have to share it with anybody. But when you're sitting down to work, record what you do. Sometimes it may help to talk through it, like why are you doing what you're doing? But most VAs can figure it out very quickly. They can see what you're doing. Most people are amazed when they do that a decent VA will be able to quickly pick up, maybe with a little bit of training, and maybe be able to do 80%, even 90% of the stuff that you do, that you're doing every day, that you think, oh, I'm a special snowflake. Nobody else would possibly be able to do this. And yet, with a little bit of training, a smart human can do a lot of that. And if a smart human can do it, we're very close to the point where a smart machine can do it. Right, I'll shut up for a bit.
No, I love that. Quite a few things that you mentioned along the way there got me thinking about assistance and automation and thinking in terms of even when you're onboarding a new team member and it's the first time that they've ever done a particular task and you've mapped out the process and they start following along and then something might happen where, my process is broken here. This step isn't very clear to me, or it's not properly covered, or all my interfaces changed, and then they get stuck.
Yeah.
And then they have to ask for help, and someone has to kind of step in and help them. Like that happens naturally. And then you kind of apply that to the computer. We see that with things like Zapier, where you might plan out a workflow and it bounces through and then something breaks and it just stops. And I feel like the AI now, with the intelligent piece that steps in, it can then make decisions rather than just breaking at that point in time and then abandoning. Now it can go, oh, this problem's arrived. I've got new data. How can I add that into the mix, reevaluate the situation, and then choose the next course of action?
That brings up a couple of thoughts for me. Is one that maybe it's changed a bit now, but certainly back in the day, a lot of the VAs that you and I hired and many people we know were from the Philippines, and there's a big cultural thing there about saving face, and a lot of times they didn't want to ask, didn't want to say I'm stuck, and so tried to sort of like push through and just deliver, and that's why sometimes from that point on everything was wrong. The AI is very much like that. It is just so programmed to want to please. It is like a golden retriever alien at this point. It's like it's doing everything it can to help deliver what it was that you asked for. And that's where the hallucination comes in. It is very bad at saying, oh, I didn't know what to do here. I'll stop. I would love a setting on there of like, how snarky it should be. I'd love it if occasionally it just said, that's a stupid idea, Mike. Why are you doing that? Instead, it says, certainly, I'll help you with that. What a great idea. Like, actually, no, it's not. It's a stupid idea. Stop me, please. I have too many ideas. So there is that sort of element of wanting to please. But this is where I'm also reminded of Ray Dalio's fantastic book, Principles. First half of that book is great. Second half, don't worry about it. But the first half talks about how he built the largest hedge fund in the world, and it was by building algorithms. And then the critical part was algorithms for trading, that they ran those algorithms in parallel with the humans. And any time something didn't match, they went, oh, either we've missed a step from the algorithm, we need to update it, or actually maybe the human's having a bad day. They're not following the rules that they said they always follow. Let's update the human. And over 40 years of doing this, both the humans and the algorithms got better and better and better. And any time there's a mismatch, they improve the algorithm. The critical thing, though, that you said, which is so good and missed by so many people, is that the AI enables all kinds of automation that we didn't have before. So that 10-80-10, I used to sort of draw out in this weird fractal way. I won't try and explain it without a whiteboard. It's also probably really out of date now. But there's two parts to that work being done. There is a rule-based component, like following the rules. I can get some data in, I can mush that around in a spreadsheet and know if this, then that. But there's a huge subjective component to then maybe what to do with the output of those rules. I've run it through all the rules, but is this really important or not? And the AI part, the generative AI part, can now make those subjective decisions within some guidelines and parameters that you set. But it's not rule based. Like think about a formula in Google Sheets. And
Mm.
that's rule based. If this cell is more than this, then do that. But
Yes.
it can't write a novel. It can't reply to an email based on rules in a cell. But that's what the AI is so good at. Now you combine those two things together, the automation and the AI, it enables to do stuff at scale that just simply was
Mm.
not possible before.
It's almost like this. Well, the LLMs, they're a prediction machine where it's got access to a huge amount of data, and then the small short-term data that we might submit through a context window then effectively surfaces or identifies the most important information now in the huge amount of data it has access to, because we've now said, well, this is the situation, this is what's important to me, and then it can do its analysis, and then it's guessing. It's saying,
Yep.
based on everything that I know, the most probable next word or answer that will go here is this. So
Yep.
it's able to then help to bridge those gaps, just like great team members do in your organization. Like just
Yeah.
because something isn't systemized in your business doesn't mean it's going to magically stop happening. Like great team
Yeah.
members will paper over the cracks where there are
Yes.
no systems, and they will
Yes.
fill in the gaps. And like you
That's
were
probably
talking
80% of businesses.
about, help to bridge those. No, can.
You said, but it's not rule based. Like think about a formula in Google Sheets. And
Mm.
that's rule based. If this cell is more than this, then do that. But
Yes.
it can't write a novel. It can't reply to an email based on rules in a cell. But that's what the AI is so good at. Now you combine those two things together, the automation and the AI, it enables to do stuff at scale that just simply was
Mm.
not possible before.
It's almost like this. Well, the LLMs, they're a prediction machine where it's got access to a huge amount of data, and then the small short-term data that we might submit through a context window then effectively surfaces or identifies the most important information now in the huge amount of data it has access to, because we've now said, well, this is the situation, this is what's important to me, and then it can do its analysis, and then it's guessing. It's saying,
Yep.
based on everything that I know, the most probable next word or answer that will go here is this. So
Yep.
it's able to then help to bridge those gaps, just like great team members do in your organization. Like just
Yeah.
because something isn't systemized in your business doesn't mean it's going to magically stop happening. Like great team
Yeah.
members will paper over the cracks where there are
Yes.
no systems, and they will
Yes.
fill in the gaps. And like you
That's
were
probably
talking,
80% of businesses. There
yes,
there
yeah,
aren't there aren't documented SOPs.
yep,
There are people that know what to do. It's all up here. Sometimes it's the business owner, other times it is, like say, great team members. And then a person leaves and stuff starts falling down because other people don't know what it was that they did or how they did it.
yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And then it's that then means like the base level is now with AI. It's increasing the base level around for what a team member needs to add to the business to actually contribute, because the AI is taking off some of those tasks that really are just heavily process driven or might need some minor decisions. And over time, it's going to get smarter and smarter at making those decisions, which really means the human needs to get better and better,
Yeah.
which kind of brings me back to the idea of, well, what do we get the AI to do?